Hey, it's JK. So... This run was really painful, like really painful, but let's explain what led to this point. In this run, we'll be going through to New Game ++ and Dark Souls 2. For the first cycle, we will only level the strength stat. For the second cycle, we will only level Dex, and for the final cycle, we will only level ADP. I can use any weapon I want for killing normal enemies, but once I use a weapon to kill a boss, that weapon is then discarded. We'll be beating all bosses, meaning this run will feature a total of 123 boss fights with 123 different weapons. For the strength and dex cycles, the weapon must have that respective stat as their highest scaling, and for the final cycle, anything goes. Given the first two cycles will involve no level ups to health or adaptability, you can probably see why this sucked. Last thing before we start, you'll see a number on the screen right now, 14,879. This number relates to this video in some way. Let me know in the comments below what you think this number is, and a little later on in the video, we'll see if you were right. For now, let's see if we have the strength to adapt to this run, or if we end up needing some Dextra support.
Like a moth drawn to a flame, your wings will burn in anguish.
First up, some old ladies told me I was going to die over and over. And they were right. We name our character One Derp and made this beautiful creature. We normally choose Deprived, but this time we choose Swordsman as DS2 has a lot of strength weapons with higher dex requirements than the other games. Unfortunately, neither of his starting weapons are good for this run though. Instead, we grab the Morning Star from Medulla and head to Forest of Fallen Giants. Ooh, a throwing knife! Here, this turtle guy helps me get the shortcut and we get a lucky wing spear drop for later. It's first boss time. We'll be using the Morning Star for the last giant. It deals bleed, which helps to speed this up even though it's just a flat 200 damage. I beat him without taking a hit, a star performance that left the last giant stands in mourning. With the souls we gained, we buy the hand axe and club from Melentia to improve our arsenal. We then get our first level up, bringing us to 16 strength. We then buy Lenegrass' key from Melentia and get her to move to Medulla for infinite life gems. After helping Lazy Grass get back into his shop, we hide to Head's Towers of Flame. To make that one guy in the comments who gets really angry when I make Dragon Rider fall off the edge, I decided to fight him normally on this run. I probably should have raised all the platforms, but oh well. The club is a good enough weapon as he's weak to strike damage, but his attacks are so easy to dodge anyway, I probably could have just used my bare fists. I love the sound it makes when hitting him. Bonk. We deny him entry from our club and finish off the fight shortly after. We increase our weapon stock by buying the mace and battle axe from Lenegrast. After this, we level up strength again. We could buy Titanite shards, but Lenegrast only sells 10, so maybe it's better to save them for later. Let's challenge the Pursuer instead. He's also weak to strike damage, so let's get the mace on the go. Our damage was solid, and I feel good knowing a certain contingent of my audience is going to be really excited for me using this weapon again. I dodged most of his attacks, but got greedy at the end and got caught by the sword stab. Thankfully, I killed him in the next hit. I promise I'll be more careful in future. Just beyond him, we grab the Dranglaic sword for later. We used some of his souls to buy effigies from Melentia and get the Silver Serpent ring +1. More souls will never not be useful. We then level up, reaching 28 strength already after just 3 bosses. With Pursuer down, we fly to the Lost Bastille where we get the Dull Ember. We do a little Donkey Kong to blow up this wall and then give the Duff Ember to McDull. As well as using him for upgrades, we can light the torch near him to get him to move so we can get the Craftsman's Hammer and some Twinkling Titanite. We then go back to Hades and take the path beyond Dragon Rider, where I thankfully remembered to put on the Silver Serpent ring and Ring of Blades. In No Man's Wharf, we do all the usual things like running through, pulling the lever, and unlocking the shortcut. We also grab the Royal Soldier's ring and the Bandit Axe. Boss time once again. We use the hand axe for Flexile Sentry. This weapon is fine, I guess. Not the most exciting weapon, let's be real, but it actually did decent damage. We even managed to get a stagger at one point so it was able to handle the sentry without too much issue. We now unlock the other route to the Lost Bastille via a nice boat ride, but we headed back to finish off Hades first. I actually upgraded the battle axe to +3, but it was more for dealing with the enemies before the boss than the boss itself. This helped a lot to clear the area, and after we smacked Ian the Guard Dragon in the face, we were ready. We easily hacked down the old Dragon Slayer in a fight that was so forgettable that I actually forgot to record it, so you'll just have to imagine it. We level up to 39 strength anyway. I decided to use the S-Stock for a bit, upgrading it to +3. After popping old Dragon Slayer's soul, we pay Lycia to open Huntsman's Copse, where we can get the Bandit's Knife. If you somehow never used them before, here's a newsflash. Thrusting swords are very powerful in this game. S-Stock in hand, we showed Rowena no mercy. Given how strong a weapon it was, I realized I didn't want to waste one of the only thrust weapons I get in this cycle on the Skeleton Lords, so I used the Bandit Axe instead for them. Even unupgraded, it still did great damage taking out the Lords in just 3 or 4 swings. Once the Lords became hordes, we smashed through them with our mighty horizontal swings capable of hitting multiple enemies at once. If these skeletons had their way, this axe wouldn't be allowed. They would have banned it. Beyond them in Harvest Valley, we skip rapidly through Chloanne's dialogue to get her back to Majula and then speak to Gavlan. There's really not much else of interest here, so we speed through to Covetous Demon. We use the Bandit Knife, bleed helps a bit, but I mean, it's Covetous Demon, come on. His immobility in this fight left him questioning his knife style choices as he died quickly in front of me. We level strength again, bringing it to 43, before returning to Earthen Peak to light the windmill on fire and speaking to Bo Raicho, who seems to have quite a full baladder. He sells the reinforced club, and we grab the Pharos Lockstone and Twinkling Titanite on the ledge beneath him. On to Mytha. Here, I decided to use the S-Stock as she's weak to pierce damage. As expected, the damage is really good here, tearing through her health bar. I wish I could S-Stock up on more of these types of weapons, but sadly only very few are strength scaling. Another boss defeated. We then head to Iron Keep, where I definitely don't die loads to Sharon and Dennis. That felt good. Bye, Dennis. A little way in, we speak to Madurold and buy the Jester's Hat and some other stuff to prompt him to give us the Gold Serpent Ring +1. All useful because there will be some farming later. We return to Majula and speak to Gilligan to set up some ladders for later, as we had some souls to spare at this point. Okay, so full disclosure, the routing's a little bit all over the place in this run, but hey, it's my run, I'll do it in any order I please. Anyway, I returned to Lost Bastille to finish some business here. I thought to try the Ruined Sentinels with the Reinforced Club as they're weak to strike, and holy Izalith, what is that damage? That's insane! I took off half of the second one's health before the third joined me up here. It was still a little scary because obviously my health is low and they can kill me quickly, but I got them on the first try thankfully, reinforcing my confidence that I could succeed in this run. I pushed forward, killing a pursuer for Twinkling Titanite on the way, and freed Strayed from his stone status. From him, we trade some boss souls for the Pursuer Ultra Greatsword and Giant Stone Axe. We leveled to 49 strength. For the Pursuer's Ultra Greatsword, we actually need 2 more decks to wield it, so we borrowed Kael's helmet. To keep our route as confusing as possible, I decided to head to the Shaded Woods, free Rosabeth, and somehow avoid dying to this gank. Then the Dragon Slayer Crescent Axe we acquire, before lighting the Shaded Ruins bonfire, then kill this guy for the Fang Key Prior, to freeing Ornifex whom we require. Next we kill this body missing a head, tried to go see Vengal, but wound up dead. Okay, enough of that. We get to head of Vengal, buy the Boruto Greatsword, the Red Rust Sword, and the Red Rust Scimitar. The latter two only become available after killing his body, hence why we did that first. Okay, so Najka. We used the Pursuer Ultra Greatsword because why the hell not? Damage was pretty decent and the fight went okay, once I got past the one-shot contest PTSD of course. She chased us a lot, so I didn't need to pursue her much except when she jumped back to cast spells. The fight did drag a little thanks to her burrowing underground a bunch, but otherwise no issues. With some more souls in hand, we upgraded our weapons with Lenegrast, and then he gave me the blacksmith hammer as a thank you for helping him pay off Chloanne's student loans. I went back to Iron Keep now and made the wise decision to try and run through. It didn't go so well. Like, really not well. But hey, at least we finally got the Zweihander. After much aggro, we get through to the Smelter Demon, who I resolved to use the Craftsman's Hammer, given he's weak to strike. It did good damage even at +1. The persistent fire AoE was definitely an issue with low health, and most of his attacks would really hurt. I'd say this was the toughest fight so far, but this weapon was almost perfectly crafted to handle it, and we managed to get through. We are now at a massive 61 strength. Feeling cockier than ever, I keep pushing through the area after Smelter Demon until we get to Old Iron King. For him, I use the Giant Stone Axe because, honestly, I don't really like this weapon, and I didn't want to waste a good one on this guy. Damage was okay enough, and the boss was one of the few who was slow enough for this weapon to work on. I tried to sing this boss a song using the axe, but it turned out he was stone deaf. But anyway, that's our first Great Soul defeated. I felt like I wanted more souls, so I decided to kill Maudlin the Armourer for the Seldora armor to increase our soul gain even further. Let's clear up a few more loose ends. For the Belfry Gargs, we used the Dragon Slayer Crescent Axe. It took a few hits to kill them even with the axe's lightning damage, which they're weak to, so sadly I couldn't kill the first two before more spawned. There was lots of running away and popping life gems, but I feel like that's kind of a standard Belfry Gargoyle fight anyway. After enough running and swinging, we crescent this boss to the afterlife. With their soul, we can get the Gargoyle's Bident. But it's now time for the first bit of farming of the run. I joined the Covenant of Champions to prevent enemies despawning. I bought some poison throwing knives from Gavlan, which actually will make this a bit easier. The farming spot is here in Doors of Pharos. I need weapons from the Mastodon Knight and the Gurm Warrior. But Gavlan also has the Gurm Great Axe, which he gives you when you buy enough stuff from him. After several runs, we got the Mastodon Halberd from the Mastodon Knight and get the Gurm Great Hammer from the Gurm Warrior. With that done, we head to Brightstone Cove. We use the Gurm Great Axe to take out the Congregation boss up ahead. It almost felt like a waste to use this beastly axe for this weak as hell boss, but it was pretty funny to unintentionally complete the one-shot again with an unupgraded weapon. It's a powerful weapon, those are the facts. Deeper in the cove, we bonk Guthrie and say hi to Ornifex. So the next Great Soul boss is here, and it's Freya. We'll use the large club and of course keep our torch up to scare off those spiders. Freya is weak to strike, and the one-handed R1 is a vertical hit which is ideal for smashing her head in. It's kinda crazy how much easier this fight is when you have the torch up. Literally becomes a joke of a boss. The laser attack is super easy to bait and gives you a huge window to run around and hit the other head. Soon after, Freya joins the club of defeated bosses. Second Great Soul done. Well, let's get another one done. Onto the Lost Sinner. On the way, we kill this knight for the Hide Spear for later. Unfortunately, I got to the Sinner's boss room and realized I didn't have a flame butterfly, so it's a fight in the dark for me. I used the Red Rust Scimitar for the Lost Sinner. Despite only being +1, the damage was great and the attack speed was fast. The short lock on range and lack of ADP definitely hurt here, and there was a couple of close calls as a result, which is another way of saying I have a skill issue. Maybe I'm just a bit rusty at this game. Luckily though, I read the Sinner's moves, and shortly after our third Great Soul is defeated. We get ourselves up to a massive 80 strength, and to be honest, I don't think I need to level it anymore. Right, let's get some more optional bosses done. We make our way to the Executioner's Chariot, and I'll never get tired of watching these guys fall off the bridge. But as much as I enjoyed that, I enjoyed stunlocking this guy even more. Using the Dragon Tooth, this surprisingly turned out to be one of the harder chariot fights in a while. I mean, killing the skeletons and necromancers was fine. The chariot though, did over half my health with each attack. We did big damage too with Dragon Tooth, but there were points where I was legit worried I might die here. Thankfully, after fighting Dragon Tooth and Nail, I managed to kill it before it killed me. I now backtrack to Earthen Peak to get the work hook. Why did I get this, you might ask? Well, I didn't want to waste a good weapon on the Royal Rat Vanguard, but this turned out to be a lot worse than I imagined. The R1s of the work hook simply cannot hit these guys, only the R2 can, and it takes 3 of them to kill 1 rat. Our range is terrible, and once the real one finally appeared, I kept getting poisoned constantly. I guess doing any boss with base health is gonna suck a little. I should stop underestimating these fights. I luckily saved myself the shame of dying to this boss and managed to somehow win out in the end. Safe to say, this weapon did not put in work. Well, now onto this wonderful place. We get the Bandit Great Axe and the Hide Lance. Can you tell I don't know how to pronounce hide? Is it hide? Is it hade? I don't know. And finally, the Great Club. We now enter the Black Gulch. I took this moment to quickly go and get the Chariot Lance from Strayed, before returning to smash up Gully and killed the giants below, completing our chores in this area. Now, onto the final Great Soul, the Rotten. As we know from the one-shot run, he's weak to thrust and lightning, so the Hide Lance was perfect. It did huge damage, especially after I remembered the old Leo ring and switched to it mid-fight. The Rotten has huge counter windows which are easy to exploit for big damage. There was no place for this big blobby boy to hide, as we took him in under 2 minutes. With all the Great Souls down, Audia brings the boom. Lastly, before leaving the Gulch, I had a nice little chat with Dumbledark. But of course now, it's time for Dranglaic Castle. On the way there, I got the Royal Greatsword from killing these guys by a good stroke of luck. Using the Mastodon Halberd, I brute forced my way into the castle. I get the Mastodon Greatsword from a chest inside and get the Butcher Knife from Ornifex. I then speak to Grandal for the last time to get all that unlocked for later before I get to the next bonfire and kill the Usurper. It wasn't even close. For the Twin Dragon Riders, I opted for the Great Club for the strike damage. The best strat I found was to get the red one to destroy the pillar the second one stands on. Then, with the weaker one on the ground, we kill it in just 2 R2s. One-on-one, the other is easy to beat given his telegraphed and easy to avoid moveset. A sometimes annoying encounter I was grateful to have finished. Further beyond, we smash the mannequins to open the way and get the key to the King's Passage. Looking Glass Knight is weak to strike, as it seems a lot of enemies are, so we use the Blacksmith's Hammer. The damage was good, but damn does he hit hard. The only downside of our weapon is its short range, so we need to be right up in his grill to hit him. I couldn't take him out before he summoned unfortunately, but at least the summon died in 3 hits. I got hit by some lightning near the end, but took a risk and went in for the kill, hammering home the point that strike weapons are pretty good. Chancellor Welliger now sells Bound Hand Axe and the Homunculus Mace, so we snap these up before Shrine of Amana. I've said it before, but the Mastodon Halberd is epic. It can take out 2 of these Archdrakes at once with spin to win. We got through the shrine pretty easily thanks to it. I mean, not this bit, but hey, at least we got the Red Iron Twin Blade. After we finally got through, my character's appearance here can probably tell you how many times I died trying, we used the Mastodon Greatsword for Demon of Song. The sword has decent damage and an okay moveset, it's nothing too exciting, but was fine to kill this boss. I mean, just the wind blowing in the wrong direction could probably take out this frog. A few more swings and the fight is master done. We actually ran out of effigies, but we can get to this altar as long as we can take out this pyromancer. What the hell? Anyway, human again. We now head to Undead Ditch and smash definitely not Lycia again. With the shortcut unlocked, it's time for Velstad. We use the Gurm Great Hammer, an anvil on a stick. Good damage, but lack of iframes here really hurts. We've taken a turn into One-Shot City. I tried using poison resin, but we never actually procced poison, so that was kind of a waste of time. I managed to thankfully dodge the overhead smash and not get one-shot. I did get hit near the end, but I just went for the kill, and after several deaths, this Anvillain dies at last. With his death, we can get the King's Ring and head to Audia's Keep. We piss off this hippo to smash the wall, which allows us to get the malformed shell weapon. Time for Ian the Guard Dragon, a notoriously easy boss. I mean, who would die to this guy? I'll be honest, the Bandit Great Axe is not great. Horrendous range, but damage is decent at least. Ian takes more damage to his head, so hitting that works best on the rare opportunities I can. The lingering hitbox of his fire is pretty annoying, but luckily I avoided the shame of dying to Ian twice and stole victory with the Bandit Great Axe. We get the ever-useful Aged Feather from the Emerald Herald before Tiny Audia talks his usual rubbish. Homunculus Mace is another epic weapon, and it does a great job smashing these knights easily. I did however decide to wear some better armor now. We then easily clubbed Gaia the Dragon Champion to death. Our good friend Ancient Dragon gave me the Ashen Mist Heart, and then killed me in the most BS way possible. Like, what was that? Why was there a shockwave there before he lifted his foot up? Right, time to put my foot down. I used the Bound Hand Axe for bleed to speed this along, but as always, this was bound to be a boring fight. Time now to delve into the Giant's memories. We grab the Giant Warrior Club from the memory of Vamar, as well as the other Giant Souls. Of course, the last Giant Soul is behind the Giant Lord boss. We use the Royal Greatsword, which is another bleed weapon. He isn't too tanky in the health department, but bleed still helps to quicken his defeat. I was a royal pain in his ankles, that's for sure. While Giant Lord may not have been that tanky, Vendrick definitely is, so this calls for another bleed weapon, the Chariot Lance. Awesome counter damage actually with the bleed helped to melt down that health. It again feels like a bit of a waste to use a good weapon on a boss like him, but I guess we gotta use it somewhere, right? The king is executed swiftly to tick another boss off our list. Now, you might think things have been going a bit smoothly, but that's about to change. Because let me tell you, Throne Watcher and Defender with low health and ADP? Yeah, this was not fun. I actually decided to use our Mastodon Halberd, a weapon I've been saving because it's so strong. I upgraded it to +9. This was a fight where one mistake could mean death, and it felt like the right place to use one of our best weapons. I mostly stuck with one hit, apart from one time when I used a spin to win to hit both of them. Throne Watcher thankfully has pretty low health, so once they're down, the fight becomes a bit easier. I actually used an R2 spin to finish off the Defender. This just shows that when tough fights like these arise, we must adorn our strongest build. This fight ending of course leads straight into Nashandra. Malformed Shell is our weapon of choice here because she's yet another boss weak to strike damage. I got cursed brutally, but thankfully her laser attacks are easy enough to bait, giving a big window to get hits in. There was no shelter for her from our giant swings. Aldia arrives, but we bone out. I'ma save him for later. Let's get DLC ready first. We grab the Dragon Talon, go plunge the Fire Lizard. Anyway, we get the Heavy Iron Key. But we won't head to the DLCs just yet. Let's do the Dark Chasms beforehand. We get the place lit up and stunlock the annoying Pyromancers, easily the worst enemy in these chasms. Okay, we finally made it to Dark Lurker. Well, that went well. If you couldn't tell already, it's Butcher Knife time. Is every attack here a one-shot? It gets even worse when you have two of them on you at once. I opted to switch out to the Red Rust Sword. I used Gold Pine Resin and a Bright Bug to boost damage to max, but honestly, it still felt pretty low. I don't know how, but I managed to dodge loads of attacks in the second phase. I didn't realize till watching it back, but I actually did this boss hitless, which I don't think I've ever done with this fight before. But even with that victory, the dread this run was about to instill in me was only just beginning. DLC time. It's on to Broom Tower first. Here, we can at last grab the Dexterity Ring, which will be helpful for wielding certain weapons. Now, I've got no idea how I got away with creeping through this room here, but sadly the same can't be said of this room here. Alluring Skulls thankfully helped to make this a little bit less painful. This next section though, always causes me issues, and I did die a lot here. Even finally getting the gate open ended in my death. But it's okay, I took out my frustration by poking Rachel till she died. We finally got the scepter, put it in the slot, and we can now get the Simpleton's Ring for some more ADP. I probably should have rushed to get this ring earlier, honestly. Guess I was the simpleton. I went back to Dragon Shrine to get the third Dragon's Ring also for more health, weight, and stamina, and then made my way to the bottom of Broom Tower at last. Fume Knight was up next, and it was the Zweihander's time to shine. Or for me to die. A lot. By far the most painful fight of the run so far. I switched to the Homunculus Mace, which I found a lot better. Except when this happens. Or this. Okay, that one's on me for seeing red there. On the winning attempt, I used Green Blossom and Gold Pine Resin. The first phase isn't too much issue, easy enough to dodge his attacks and land attacks in return. Mace swings reasonably fast even if the range isn't great. For the second phase, many of his attacks one-shot me, so I only punished certain attacks like the big sword beam and the running thrust attacks where I knew I could get away without being punished. Everything else I stayed back from and avoided. I staggered him right at the end and luckily had the damage to finish him off, finally satisfying my homunculust for victory. We get our first crown of the run. If you're wondering about the Fume Ultra Greatsword, well, despite being a classic strength weapon, Dark Souls 2 gave it a dex requirement of 30. So, yeah. Don't worry, we will use it later on, I promise. Anyway, we run to get the tower key and prepare to journey to Sir Alon. As expected, I ran for my life. For Sir Alon, I used the Red Iron Twin Blade, another awesome weapon. He was easier than Fume Knight, I thought. Mostly. Dodging through his attacks was pretty fun, but most importantly, nothing really was a one-shot. The multi-R1 combo of the Red Iron Twin Blade did loads of damage in the rare opportunities I got to pull it off after certain attacks. For other windows, I stuck to a single R1 as sometimes caution is key, but I did push the boat out and use an R2 to finish him off, executing my twin-to-win strategy. There's still one more boss in this DLC, but for now we pivot and go to Eliam Lois. Using the Zweihander, I actually killed all the enemies on the way for once. Even the bigger guys went down easy. We worked our way through, grabbed the Eye of the Priestess, didn't respect Lemon's sippy break, and then I realized I messed up. The Zweihander actually has equal strength and dex scaling, so thus I am not allowed to use it for this cycle. It was only much later that I realized at plus 10 it goes up to B scaling in strength, so it would have been allowed, but oh well. Anyway, Ava, using the Butcher Knife at plus 2. Things were going well, but one problem. The Butcher Knife was losing durability way too fast for my liking. I forgot that all the kitties have some weird aura that burns through your durability. I also had forgot to get the Ring of the Embedded, an amazing ring that boosts your health, equip load and stamina. The boost increases depending on how low these stats are. You do take more damage, but it's like 8% more, so I'd say it's a good trade-off. After getting the Butcher Knife to plus 3 and buying some repair powder, I was ready for Ava again. I used a Bright Bug and Charcoal Pine Resin. Damage was decent, but Ava can still destroy us easily if we're not careful. Dodging under the claw swipes was the perfect window for either healing or attacking, as well as getting behind her when she does the projectile attack on the rare occasions I was close enough to capitalize. The Butcher Knife attacks quick and restores health, which is nice. I used repair powder partway through to keep us topped up, and after a few more swings, we bring this fight to a close. Butcher? I hardly even know her. With Ava down, we can get rid of the Snowstorm, allowing us to get the Vessel Shield to boost more stats. With the Snowstorm gone, there was only one logical thing to do next. Head to the Sunken Crown DLC. Totally makes sense. Here, we get the Sanctum Mace, take out these guards, get the Dragonstone, and cause Jester Thomas's AI to break somehow. He just decided to stop attacking me for some reason. Jester? I hardly even know her. Well, guess what Alana is weak to? If you said strike, you would be absolutely correct. I went to take on Alana with the Giant Warrior Club. I expected a tough fight as usual, but look how much damage the opening 3 hits did. That's like 20% of her health. Crazy damage. It was the easiest Alana fight in a long time. We also one-shot the skeletons with the club, and thankfully she never summoned Velstad. It was nice for a normally really annoying fight to go down so quick. This was a giant boon for the run. With Alana down, we of course next face the Blue Smelter Demon. Weak to strike and poison, Sanctum Mace seems like the ticket. This weapon poisons enemies, but it also poisons you, which isn't great. On my second attempt, I actually killed Smelter Demon, but then died from the poison a second after, and guess what? It didn't count. The Sanctum Mace is quite unique as well in that it has spear-like attacks, but it does strike damage. The running attack hits multiple times, which is great for proccing poison, but poison moss is absolutely crucial for using this weapon to reduce the build-up on yourself. Being poisoned here when he also has his flames chipping away at your health is... it goes without saying that's bad. It's really bad. I had to focus more than ever on not being greedy, because not only would it mean he might hit me, but it also could mean I get poisoned. Despite all that, I did in fact nearly die right near the end due to being greedy, but thankfully barely dodged his follow-up, landed the finishing blow, and then ate some healing farm mace-suticals to prevent my own death. Let's take a brief break from the bosses to get yet more weapons. First, we go to the Doors of Pharos for the Gurm Axe. Then to Shrine of Amana to get Soul of the King, which we trade to get the King's Ultra Greatsword. We also traded Fume Knight's Soul for the Fume Sword. Well, let's try out the Gurm Axe on Sin the Slumbering Dragon. This might initially seem scary because of his AoE Fire Breath and the short range of the axe, but with good positioning, you can hit his head after many of his attacks. The best times are either when he lands or after the head swipe charge. Damage was pretty solid from the axe as well. Obviously there's no way to mitigate the time where he just spams flying attacks over and over, but it is what it is. Soon after, we give this worm the axe with our Gurm Axe. This victory gives us the Sunken Crown, but of course this DLC isn't done yet. There's one boss remaining, and I don't know about you, but I've got a hankering for some gankering. We used the King's Ultra Greatsword for this one. It's a pretty tedious fight as always, but at least the damage was good. I also used Gold Pine Resin for more damage, working especially well in the water parts of the arena. After crushing his buddy, the Havel Simp just kinda gave up at the end. It seems he reached his Bray King point. Serra was the last one standing, but not for long unfortunately for him. Oh well, que sera sera as they say. So just the Ivory King DLC left. Back in Elium Lois, we crush Hexa Nikolai, free an Elium Lois Knight, grab the Garrison Ward Key, free another Knight, and finally free the final knight. Then onto Ivory King. This was surprisingly easy compared to many of the other DLC fights this run. The Boruto Greatsword took out the knights with little issue, although there were still some close calls due to just my low health, but that's par for the course here. Our knight's companion actually had some decent health left himself by the time the king got in. I popped a bright bug as we waited and buffed the Boruto Greatsword with gold pine resin. We took off big chunks of health with every swing. I feel like I say this sentence almost every video, but I did nearly die right near the end. But as chance would have it, our knight friend was actually still alive and he sacrificed himself to distract the king long enough for me to heal. I was determined to ensure my comrade's sacrifice was not in vain, so I tried to end it soon after, only for the king to dodge my attack and hit me with his grab. I very much thought that I was dead here, but managed to barely survive and land a running swing to end the fight here on my first try. With that, the third crown is acquired. So lastly, of course, the frigid outskirts. I made use of the NPC summons to distract the reindeer so I could run through. I normally would not ever summon, but I feel like this is the only place where it's fine to do, otherwise just getting to the end of this area is pretty painful. So, the last DLC boss, Lud and Zalen. For them, I used the Gargoyle's Bident. With Brightbug, Old Leo Ring and Charcoal Pine Resin, damage was really good, especially during the counter windows. I had some lucky RNG when Zalen got involved, which meant I killed Lud quickly. I had to equip and use Repair Powder while in the fight because I just again forgot about their durability reduction aura, but thankfully I came out unscathed. I did such good damage that I managed to take out Zalen before it finished its buff animation, something I'm not sure I've ever done. This weapon really made some large bite dents in their health bars. With that, all the DLCs are complete for this cycle. We get the crowns restored to their full power, and then I went off to finish the only other base game boss remaining apart from Audia, the Royal Rat Authority. For this, I used the Bone Scythe. Now, I don't know if I just got lucky, but I actually managed to kill all the rats very quickly without getting toxicked for once. After that, Charcoal Pine Resin helped to bring the big guy down very quickly with some precise swings. Finally, for Audia, I used a Broken Straight Sword. Does he deserve anything better? No, he does not. It was a boring fight with a weak as hell weapon, but eventually we leave this tree broken and beaten, finishing off the cycle at last. I left the throne room, however, because our work is not done. After 18 hours of unskippable credits, I decided to grab a bunch of weapons from all around to help speed up the next cycle. I actually got the Ice Rapier drop after just 4 kills, which was really surprising. The Black Steel Katana took longer, but we got there eventually. Sadly, we were not so lucky with the Umbral Dagger. I even got the Blue Dagger, which I actually wasn't even planning to use, but I guess I should find a place for it now. With that nonsense sorted, we move to the deck cycle. But before we do, remember the number I showed you earlier? What do you think that was? Well, let me tell you. That is the number of words in the script for this video. I guess this is my way of saying that these videos take an incredible amount of work in terms of doing the run, scripting, editing, etc. So if you do enjoy my videos, I hope you'll consider subscribing to help support both the channel and my sanity as I keep making this stuff going forward. Thank you, I appreciate you all. We make it back into the old women's house and return to Majula. I get Leningrass key from Alentia ASAP and then decided to do Dragon Rider first this time with a +3 dagger. This was laughably easy, just walk around and slash repeatedly. I imagine it must have been very dagger-evating for him. We speak to Lycia just beyond him and actually buy the Ring of Prayer for later. In an effort to keep things fresh, I killed Pursuer during the first encounter, this time with a +3 Shotel. This weapon was decently fast, range wasn't great though. I did have some issues due to some mobs joining the fight at the start, but once they were dealt with, it was fairly smooth sailing to bring this boss down, taking his soul to bring to my classes Show and Tell. Now, let's do our first bit of dex leveling, getting it all the way up to 20. Next up is the last giant, and we use the scimitar for him. I mean, he hasn't changed much apart from more health. I tried the R2, but it doesn't do much more than the R1 at the cost of more time and stamina, so I just mainly spammed Scimitar 1 until he died. We take the route past the Pursuer to Lost Bastille, where we have a blast as per usual. Rune Sentinels up next. We'll be using a +3 Falchion with Gold Pine Resin. So, being that it's New Game Plus, they do a lot of damage, taking out 80% of my health with a single hit. But thankfully, we have fast attacks now and are able to dodge a bit better thanks to our ADP boosting gear. There were still a few tense moments, but soon after this boss falls. We have enough souls to get up to 29 dex. So we do. We head to Shaded Woods and kill all these idiots for a bit of revenge. Forlorn invaded me. I didn't really get his points, but I made sure he got mine. I used the pike for Najka because, as we know, she's weak to thrust damage. Even at just +3, the charcoal pine resin and old Leo ring help this to do great damage. The pike also has really good range and can get multiple hits in, so this was a fine choice. Najka very much despises being poked repeatedly, it seems. We're up to 34 dex now. Instead of leaving it till last, let's get Royal Rat Authority out of the way now. I plan to use the Old Knight's Halberd spinning attack to take all the rats out in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, I still got toxicked and died though. Next try, I managed to pull it off successfully, wiping out all the little buggers at once. Charcoal pine resin was probably unnecessary, but honestly, I despise this boss, so no regrets. It how burdens this cycle with its presence no longer. With that rubbish done, we head to Brightstone Cove where these guys are on a roll. We quickly say hi to Freya, after which we get a lucky drop of Peasant Gloves, which gives us 2 more ADP. The more the better, what a peasant surprise. For the congregation, we're going to use the Murakumo. The damage was very good, resin again was probably unnecessary, backstabs finished off the main ones, and the overhand R2 smash worked great for killing the little guys on the floor. Let's be real, they would have needed a miracle to beat me here. Further in the cove, the spiders gave me a nice warm welcome. Time for Freya. We used the Mirror Greatsword with a torch. This weapon felt fairly unremarkable, but to be honest it performed fine for Freya, who was very easy to just walk around and slash a few times with it till she died. This fight was basically a mirror image of how it went last cycle. Now we get to 43 dex, right before we free Ornifex. We trade for Spider's Silk with Freya's Soul, before going back into this hellhole. I honestly tried to spend as little time here as possible, and I just rushed to the Black Gulch. I poked the Woodland Child off the ledge and lit the second bonfire. So, onto the Misberotten Crusader. We used the Wing Spear for this one, buffed once again with gold pine resin. This was an easy back and forth fight just like before, almost hitless apart from this one time with whatever the hitbox of this shockwave was. A few more stabs and the Wing Spear helps us to glide to victory. While I was down here, I decided to do Royal Rat Vanguard as well. I opted to use Spider Silk because I realized looking at the stats how weak it was and I didn't want to have to waste precious petrified dragon bones on upgrading it. This was not a great fight. It took several hits to kill each rat, and the main rat actually did loads of damage to me once he spawned. Not as silky smooth as I had hoped, but with enough thrusts, the second rat fight of this cycle is over with at least. We head into Huntsman's Copse because, well, why not? No, really, why not? Tell me in the comments. Right now, I want to know! So, the Skeleton Lords. For them, we used the Melu Scimitar, which I assumed had some special effect, but actually, it's just a pretty mediocre weapon. Perfect for this mediocre boss, I guess. The Lords were fine, but the Skeleton Hordes could annihilate me if I wasn't careful. It was a lot of running away and slashing, but I kept positive thoughts in my head to keep myself Melu until it was over. We head into Earthen Peak proper and use Rickard's Rapier on the Covetous Demon. The R2 hits loads of times, but it just doesn't seem as efficient as multiple R1s, honestly. The counter scaling on the Rapier is pretty good, so the damage jumps up a lot when we hit the Covetous Demon during his massive windows. A few more stabs, and he goes into Riccardiac Arrest. Let's just keep pushing through. We get the windmill lit up and take on Mitha. We fought her with Hyde's spear as she's weak to thrust, but I forgot that she actually resists lightning, and I got poked by the air around her spear for a quick death. So I used Pate's spear instead. Even unupgraded, it did great damage with the charcoal pine resin buff. I got lucky near the start with Mitha repeating the same tail attack over and over, giving me a good window to attack for counter damage. Obviously her damage is high, so we still have to be careful, but with enough patience we leave her contemplating her life choices as she dies. Guess what? We're up to 50 dex now. So onto Iron Keep, fun times ahead. I somehow managed to run to Smelter Demon and not get hit going through the fog gate. Now, it was time to use the Hade Spear for lightning damage. I did pretty well until I mistimed this dodge and got wiped out by the fire from his sword. Next time, I managed to succeed through a flurry of fiery dodges, lifting my spirits as the run continued. The Alon Knights ahead now dropped Black Steel Katanas relentlessly. Thanks guys. Just before the bonfire, we fried up the Red Phantom until he was nice and crispy. I used the Great Scythe for the old Iron King, as I didn't want to have to worry about the silly sweet spot for a more mobile boss. I did unfortunately end up having a super frustrating death, not from the lava mind you, but the edge of his fire hitting me and one-shotting me just as I landed the final blow, and guess what? It didn't count. Next time though, I got him. The scythe was +6, did okay damage, not amazing, but fine for this boss. I just slashed when he did his hand slams, and that's about as con-scythe as I can say it. Now, we get up to 58 dex. Before heading to the gutter, I went to clear up some optional bosses. So first, I used the washing pole +9 to clear hides, which was a slow and tedious process, but we got there eventually. I forgot about the damn red phantom near the end though. Next go around, we got through and killed Ian. So back to old Dragon Slayer, whose fight I did remember to record this time, and for him we used the Royal Dirk. It's technically a dagger, but it has a longer reach than most daggers by quite a bit. It has quick attacks, so we used the rotten pine resin to easily proc poison and make the fight go a bit faster. I mean, this probably was unnecessary, but to be honest, any help clearing a Dirksome boss is always good. As it's not too far away, let's do the Flexile Sentry next. I decided to use the unupgraded Umbral Dagger for some reason. I actually forgot about the additional enemies in the fight, which is really going to annoy that one commenter who keeps saying how annoyed they are by me forgetting things all the time, but the dagger handled them surprisingly well. A little bit of rotten pine resin helped to bring down the sentry quick. Shame he couldn't shield himself from my rain of slashes with an umbrella. Back to Lost Bastille, we did the Belfry Gargoyles with the +9 Partisan. Damage was alright, but not that special. At least we had some range this time, but it didn't prevent this from being a run around and spam life gems sesh. At least I got to work on my partisanal skills. With some optional bosses now cleared, let's head below to Lost Sinner. We can actually take out this red phantom mummy in the water easily for once, instead of getting body blocked and blown up. For Lost Sinner, I used the Lois Greatsword +1. I had a theory I wanted to test here though. In New Game Plus, 2 pyromancers joined the fray about halfway in, but is their joining the fight tied to lighting up the room? I decided to go in the dark, and I was incorrect. The pyro douches still come regardless. Luckily though, I killed them in 2 hits. I used the R2 of the Greatsword to poke the Sinner in her counter windows. This all went pretty smoothly, apart from a few erroneous hits here and there, but after a few stabs, we rejoice in the glory of our victory. As that's the 4th Great Soul of the cycle, Audia now appears again. There's a couple of other bits and pieces I want to clear up quick. We get Myth's Bent Strayed from Blade, and then get the Chaos Blade from Ornifex using the New Game Plus exclusive soul dropped by the Lost Sinner. We also still need to do the Executioner's Chariot. I had another wacky theory I wanted to test out here. Do the Necromancers respawn if you kill them and then quit the game? Well, sadly they do. I mean, I killed them easily with the Dranglaic Sword +1, but good to know for future. The horse also went down with no issue this time. I just stuck to its side, and soon it died, leaving a Dranglaic of blood on the ground beneath it. Speaking of Dranglaic, finally time for Dranglaic Castle, and let me tell ya, this red phantom killed me more times than many of the bosses in this run. I literally just managed to get the golems activated before dying. I ran all the way back and got in the castle as quick as I could, managing to activate the bonfire, but guess what? The red phantom chased me all the way here and killed me. Well, anyway, screw that guy. On to the Dragon Riders with the Charred Lois Greatsword. Probably should have upgraded it before doing this fight, but ah well. We take out the greenish one first as he has lower health, which seems to just be the best strategy for melee. The damage was actually still decent even unupgraded. Once the first is down, the other wasn't too hard to kill. In case you were curious, we have reached 67 dex. So of course, we activate the golem to bring the lift down, but the small room at the top now has a red phantom too. Why does this guy have so much health? Even the backstab didn't do that much. What a beast. So for Looking Glass Knight, I've got a pretty interesting weapon choice. The +2 Drakeblood Greatsword for its fire and lightning damage, perfect for covering both bases as Looking Glass Knight is weak to fire, but the rain makes lightning stronger. The only issue was accidentally hitting his shield from time to time with the way the weapon swings, or maybe that's a skill issue on my part. Probably the latter. The summon was easy enough to Drake down at least, and the knight followed shortly after. Shrine of Amana time, the consistent fan favourite. I slashed up the new Red Phantom NPC here, and killed off these idiots with the rapier this time round. For the durability killing bugs blocking the way, I used throwing knives to get rid of them to avoid my equipment getting broken, and it was pretty effective. I needed a place to use the Warp Sword +1, and the Demon of Song seemed as good a candidate as any. I used rotten pine resin initially for a bit of poison to take the health away while Froggy was hiding in its skin, but then used gold pine resin for the water boosted damage. I was kinda just messing about really, easy boss even with a barely upgraded weapon. This fight flew by. I guess we accidentally engaged the warp drive. After getting up to 73 dex, we upgrade the flamberge to +9. If you guessed that we're going to use the flamberge for Velstad, well, I'll send you your medal shortly. I thought the bleed would be better here, but it wasn't. Turns out we couldn't really get enough hits in to proc it consistently. It still did decent enough damage, and I was proud of the dodging I did here after my failings in the last cycle. I mean, I know I have more ADP boosting gear than back then, but hey, let me have this one. Velstad goes down without too much issue, thanks to me fighting my greedy flamberges and taking my time. With the King's Ring in hand, we move on to Oldia's Keep, where I took out the greatest swordsman in Mirror in a fierce battle. For Ian the Guard Dragon, I actually used the key to the embedded. I thought this was like a silly, funny gimmick weapon, but the damage certainly was no joke. I actually got some huge numbers thanks to its giant counter modifier, which was the key to our success as we sliced through Ian easily. We got to 80 dex, and much like our strength in the previous cycle, I don't really see any need to level it up more. We make it to the Dragon Shrine, where the wind from this guy's arm movement kills me in a Dark Souls 1 Titanite demon moment. I actually had a close fight with the champion. Poison knives helped to weaken him, but he did nearly kill me. That is some big damage. I grabbed the Ashen Mist Heart, but this time I'm not going to fight this dragon for the moment. Gotta build myself up to that endeavor. So I went and killed the giants instead, and using the key they dropped, got the Dragon Talon. That's right, it's time for the DLC now. I'll take a less chaotic route this time, I promise. I used a throwing knife to access the bonfire here. I'm enjoying how much I've got to use them on this run. But enjoyment might end here as it's time for Alana. I used the black steel katana here with the gold pine resin. Maybe this is an obvious statement, but it's crazy how easy she is with melee versus using magic or archery. I easily killed the skeletons again, but I didn't get so lucky this time and she did indeed summon Velstad. I opted to just avoid him and do hit and run as it seemed easier than trying to kill him. I was on a bit of a timer though, because if I took too long here, she'd summon skeletons as well. I was fortunate in that I was able to take her out before then, plunging my steel into her black heart to end this one. I was in a katana frame of mind it seems, so for Sin, I went with the trusty Uchi katana. I was a little worried about the durability situation given his skin erodes weapons, but that never became an issue honestly. This was a great choice, the damage was really good. Hitting Sin's head after his attacks was very satisfying. I actually only got hit once thanks to his head poking me from his flying dive. Kinda crazy that somehow didn't knock me down or even stagger me whatsoever, very odd. But as a weapon selection, the Uchi was all Gucci. Our first crown in New Game Plus is ours. I wish this DLC was done, but the Gank squad, oh my god, this was actual pain. I initially tried using the Manslayer as I thought poison would help, but I couldn't hit frequently enough to proc it. This death here was after 13 minutes of fighting them. This was the most frustrating fight so far. The number of times attempts ended because I misjudged how far they could attack me from or other such factors was truly infuriating. After such good progress with the previous two bosses, this was the fight that broke me. On the winning attempt, I did end up using the Manslayer. I actually got Varg to hurt Sarah in a rarely seen glitch where friendly fire is allowed if they are at the end of an attack animation. With him down, it was a lot of running away and occasional hits on the Grave Robber. But Varg was the biggest issue. My attacks don't stagger him, and he can annihilate my health with a single hit, and it's really hard to actually land a hit of my own without getting punished. If I do get hit and then miss time dodging his follow-up, I'm dead. I tried consumables out of desperation like alluring skulls, which obviously didn't work. I did get one backstab when he healed and then used throwing knives to finish him. I guess you could technically say this was cheating, but this fight here lasted 26 minutes. I'm not doing that again. Anything to slay this man was fair game in my opinion. Let's go for a palate cleanser in Broom Tower. Alluring skulls help to get through this room again. Sort of. Wait, these barrel guys can actually attack you? Never seen that before. We actually use them to blow up the big guy this time. We get the area sorted by grabbing the scepter and stabbing the idols, because obviously we don't want Rami Malek to heal. Given the trouble this fight caused me last cycle, I was ready to crack out the big guns. That's right, it's time for a max upgraded rapier. I used a bright bug and also gold pine resin to help give us every advantage possible for Fume Knight. The rapier, to the surprise of no one, was really good. easy to dodge lots of his attacks, and quickly punished due to quick attack animations and low stamina cost. He actually didn't go to his second phase until right near the end of the fight, thanks to him smashing his sword in the ground in rage whenever I tried to use life gems. This went much better than last cycle, probably thanks to our rapierless weapon. Okay, so it's not quite peerless given that there are others in its class, like the Espada Ropera, which we'll use for Sir Alon. It's similar to the rapier, but slightly better damage. I used a bright bug again with gold pine resin, and this did go pretty smoothly for the same reasons as with Fume Knight. I did actually almost get the hitless, and I no joke debated restarting the attempt when I did get hit, but after all I'd been through so far, and how much I still had to do on this run, I just took the win as is. Good thing the durability of this weapon survived, it would have been a pain to Ropera it mid-fight. So that just leaves Blue Smelter Demon. My original plan was to use Mytha's Bent Blade for the poison and toxic to wear him down, but it honestly didn't go very well. Once again, the hitboxes of this fight caused me issues. And that's nothing to do with ADP, I wasn't even rolling there. Surviving long enough for the poison to kill him seemed to be an issue, so I tried with the Curved Dragon Greatsword, but still things went badly for your boy. Next attempt though, the Curved Dragon Greatsword got it done. I used a bright bug and stuck to one attack with each opening for safety. Elizabeth Mushrooms and Radiant Life Gems helped to keep the health up. This was a harsh difficulty curve compared to the previous couple DLC fights, but at least it won't drag on any longer. So it's Elium Lois now to finish off the DLC Gauntlet. We eat some enemies off the edge and get another Ice Rapier drop right away because of course we do. In a fitting choice, I use the sword known as Elium Lois against Arva for some good synergy. It does have bleed, which did proc once or twice, but it's only 200 flat damage, so it doesn't really add much against Arva's massive health pool in New Game Plus. But it did decent damage and had fast swings, which I needed for this. We defeated the kitty shortly after to make the rest of the level available to explore. So we did all the torch lighting and night gathering to set ourselves up for the next two bosses. That of course means it's Ivory King time. To keep the synergy going, I went with the Ice Rapier here, which felt appropriate. The first attempt was going really well, until this happened. One wrong dodge after all that. Back to the start, I guess. For the knights, I used gold pine resin to help bring them down quickly, plus Elizabeth Mushrooms for passive healing. I again used a bright bug before the king came out. I got some good counter hits on him and managed to dodge a lot of his attacks, although as always did get caught near the end. This time, I managed to dodge the swipe that killed me previously, and then his sword buff wore off, allowing me to put the king on ice shortly after. I got through to Lud and Zalin, but on slowing the footage down, Arva's back foot I think landed on me here, but I guess I wasn't expecting that to be a one-shot. More fool me, I guess. For whatever reason, the cats were really overexcited today. Seriously, what's going on with them? Did they feed them catnip on New Game Plus? I kept really struggling with this because I just couldn't get the damage off to finish off Lud before Zalin got properly involved. After trying different weapons, I went with the Drakewing Ultra Greatsword, and the thing that saved me was actually the weapon art. It counts as a thrust attack, and with the old Leo ring, it dealt a monster amount of damage close up during Lud's counter windows. It only took 2 to finish him off when Zalin joined the fight. I was still bricking it while fighting Zalin, terrified of dying, and ended up using 2 bright bugs, which was probably a waste. With some surprisingly good dodging, I got through and survived. Drake it till you make it, I guess. I was really just winging it here. With the DLC all done, time for Dark Lurker. I made use of some heavy cheese to get through the chasms. I regret nothing. For Dark Lurker, I used the washing pole. Finally, it's time to shine. I used a bright bug and gold pine resin as soon as I got in. I think I got kinda lucky here because I managed to get him down to about 30% health by the time he split. The last part was pretty chaotic, with projectiles firing everywhere, and I had a rare experience in a FromSoft game where there was an attack that looked like it should have hit me, but actually it didn't. How did his beam sword not damage me here? Anyway, after lots of running and hitting later, he finally goes down. Farewell to one of the best weapons I used on this cycle. hung out to dry at last. Time to clear up the rest of the cycle now. I ended up using Mythos Bent Blade for Ancient Dragon. I didn't really want to use any petrified dragon bones on it, so I just let the poison and toxic bring its health down quickly. Guess this Ancient Dragon really is mythical. For Vendrick, I used the Bewitched Alon Sword. You might think this feels like a waste of this cool weapon, but the low durability really put me off using it in the DLC fights, and it was my last bleed weapon left, which helped to speed this along a little bit. Which boss do we do next? Well, it's Giant Lord. We use the Fume Sword. Damage was fine because he's weak to dark, but overall this seems like quite an underwhelming boss weapon. I'm not really sure why you'd want to choose this over the Ultra Greatsword. I'd be fuming if I picked this over that. Despite the DLC being completed, there was still one last boss I was kind of worried about on this cycle, that being Throne Watcher and Defender. And I was right to be worried. I used the Helix Halberd with the old Leo ring for counter thrust damage. The halberd, you see, has a heavy attack poke where the hidden spike pops out at the end. This is only at +2 and the damage was huge, with Gold Pine Resin and Brightbug of course. I just went for one poke at a time, being very cautious honestly, until at last the Defender died. Then the Watcher with its low health was easy to take down. A few more pokes and he licks the dirt on the ground. Okay, let's finish this cycle. Nishandra had a date with the Puzzling Stone Sword. I know this has a cool whip heavy attack, but I didn't find a good use for it in the fight, so I just poked her to death with Gold Pine Resin. Its light attacks are basically the same as a rapier. She went down quick, leaving her puzzled over what had just transpired. And lastly, Audia, for whom we use the Chaos Blade. You lose health with each hit of this katana, so I hadn't wanted to use it on a challenging boss, but the health drain wasn't as bad as I thought actually. Other than that, it's the usual Audia fight, and we chaostracize him from the world of the living. This time, I tune myself away with the deck cycle complete. But sadly, this run is not over, not by a long shot. I won't go through every single one, but I went and grabbed some weapons for the last cycle. You'll see them as we go through. While doing this, I got invaded, and I got killed by the air in front of this guy's spear. Is that like a lag thing or something? It looks like his spear was nowhere near me. Anyhow, the ADP cycle begins.
Hey, Babs here. So, you might remember that in the Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3 one stat per cycle videos, I did a cameo where I pulled off an epic boss kill. JK asked me if I wanted to do that for this video as well, and I said no, because fuck Dark Souls 2.
First things first, I'm not suffering low ADP for another moment, so I use all my souls from these last few boss fights to get up to 26 ADP right away. The Medulla Pit is our first destination this time. I did make it to Black Gulch, but I broke my gear on the way, and Lenegra's shop isn't open to repair it yet. Oops. Let's just run and get Lenegra's key real quick. With my equipment repaired, it was time again for the Rotten. I used the Thorn Greatsword for, say it with me, lightning and thrust damage. This was unupgraded, so damage wasn't incredible, but it didn't matter. We smashed through, barely getting hit. With him beaten for the final time, this boss was no longer a thorn in our side. We should probably do Last Giant now for Melentia's Infinite Life Gem shop. I'm going to use the Retainer Shortsword here. We kind of need to use this for an easy boss because we need to use Blackweed Balm to even wield it thanks to the intelligence requirement. It's got quick attacks and some magic damage, so it's okay, but it's not a weapon whose services I'll be looking to retain after this fight. I actually killed the giants below the Black Gulch earlier this cycle to get the key for the first DLC right away. I want to really change up the route here, so I plan to try and get the harder DLC stuff done earlier this time. Deep inside, both the Invisible Knights and Forlorn seemed really aroused by my presence. It seems like they fell for me. I used some knives to kill the rest of them, and then sent this Jester to fester at the bottom of this chasm. Given how painful this fight was on the last run, I took on the Gank squad first this time to get it out the way. Time for the return of our +9 Zweihander. The heavy attack poke knocked down the Grave Robber and Serra, so taking them out by timing these as they came towards me was pretty easy. For Varg, who doesn't seem to consistently get knocked down by our poke, I kept getting him to drop down from this ledge and hitting him with a poke as he landed. It was still slow, but way quicker and safer than the last cycle. This only took 14 minutes, and we got him first try. Was this a waste of the Zweihander? Time will tell, but at least it handled this fight without too much issue. We now get ADP up to 32. For Alana, I used the Stone Twin Blade at plus 10. With Brightbug and Gold Pine Resin, we had some great damage and had her down to about 40% health by the time she did her first summon, Velstad. Luckily, we could attack quick enough to just kite Velstad around and hit and run. This surprisingly again wasn't too difficult, and she went down after just 4 minutes. Did we really go through 3 cycles without this fight causing us problems? Am I stoned or something? For Sin, I decided to be lore accurate, or perhaps I should say Yorg accurate, and used Yorg's Spear at plus 2. This weapon can poke like a spear, swish like a twin blade, and spin to win like a halberd. Damage was good, and the poke meant I could nicely get his head after the charging swipe. He did fly a bit too much for my liking towards the end, meaning there was a lot of waiting around, but with enough patience he goes down and DLC 1 is complete already. Our ADP is looking nice at 42 now. Pretty sure 42 ADP is the meaning of life. We can't get to any of the other DLCs yet, so instead we move on to Hides, where we use knives to help clear out the night enemies, and we use the malformed skull to kill Ian. This could well be the skull of one of his relatives, so it felt like the right thing to do. We have Ornstein at home? Well, I have a blue dagger in my hand. It's unupgraded and buffed with rotten pine resin to bring his health down quickly. I barely got hit apart from the lingering hitbox from the shockwave of his jump attack, leaving the old Dragon Slayer feeling blue. I then used the Watcher Greatsword to take down Dragon Rider, also unupgraded. Are you proud of me for not cheesing Dragon Rider on any of these cycles? Are you? I hope you were watching, Dragon Rider loving comments guy. Anyway, we now head to Huntsman's Copse and take on the final Skeleton Lord's fight. I used the Lost Sinner's Sword, which I had no intention of using Petrified Dragon Bones to upgrade. It actually took quite a few hits to take the enemies down, which I guess isn't surprising. I believe this sword has some kind of damage calculation based on whether you've killed NPCs or not, but it wasn't something I looked into. With the Horde, I waited for a big group to come close and then did the heavy attack to hit several at the same time. Hopefully, the syntax of my sentence describing this fight was sufficient. So we head straight to Harvest Valley and Covetous Demon. I used the Moonlight Greatsword for Covetous Demon. What? He's weak to magic. Also, we needed to use Blackweed Bomb to wield, and that's just too limiting to use in a real boss fight. The projectile did very little damage from a distance, but close up, it was still bad. A pretty mundane encounter overall. With our now 45 ADP, I proceed up and get the windmill lit for the last time. Let's blast through these next few bosses. We use the Spitfire Spear for Mitha. As we know from the previous cycle, she's weak to fire and thrust, but this weapon isn't upgraded, so yeah, damage isn't good. Our high ADP shines here though, dodging feels so much more forgiving than before. The Fireball R2 did very little, so I didn't really use it. I just kept within spitting distance and poking her till she died. For Smelter Demon, I used the Ivory Straight-Sword initially because it has strike damage, but unupgraded, it was pretty poor damage, and the moveset seemed weirdly slow. So I quickly pivoted mid-fight to the Yellow Quartz Longsword plus 6 with Rotten Pine Resin. Damage was okay, and 2 rounds of poison helped to bring this one down pretty quickly. I don't know if this was a waste of this weapon or not, but I just had to choose something quickly as changing weapon mid-fight caught me off guard. Let's have some fun with Old Iron King. I decided to switch to the butterfly armor for immense fashion and possible poison. This, of course, did nothing to help due to the king's high poison resist. I used the barbed club for strike damage here. I had mistakenly thought he could be bled for some reason, but I guess I imagined that. Oh well. We can get 4 hits in when he does a fist slam or hand beam, and we sedate him shortly after with a heavy dose of barbiturates. 50 ADP now, lads. And you know what beating Old Iron King means? We can go down the Salamander Pit again, get the Heavy Iron Key, and do a very early Broom Tower. Now, I literally do not want to spend another second talking about how I made it through this room or the rest of the tower. I did get a satisfying kill on Quicksword Rachel though. I used the standard Twin Blade for Blue Smelter Demon with Rotten Pine Resin and Butterfly Set for maximum poison. Twin Blade hits lots, so easy to proc the poison. ADP made such a difference to this fight, it was just unbelievable. Dodging his attacks felt like a dream, and soon after, we execute our twin condition. I used the classic broadsword for Fume Knight. Well, should have expected that. Much like my camping trip from last year, this was pretty intense. The broadsword was at +9, damage was okay but not amazing, there was a lot of dodging and weaving back and forth, another example of how much ADP makes a difference to the game. It was a fun fight this time round, broadly speaking at least, and felt satisfying instead of frustrating, which is always good. We of course can't do Cerulon yet as we don't have the Ashen Mist Heart on this cycle, so we'll move on for now. Time to blast through a lot of bosses. First, we head to Shaded Woods. We use the Scythe of Na Alma for Najka. The sweet spot damage was decent and it swings fast as well. Didn't know where else to use this weapon to be honest. We tick Najka off in our DS2 Almanac. We make our way through Doors of Pharos, backstabbing some Germs on the way. We then had another intimate encounter with Freya, something that made these degenerate peasants get a bit too excited. We use the Dragon Rider Halberd for Congregation because spin to win. Basically do that on repeat and keep ridering the wave of success. We use Black Flamestone Dagger at +6 for Freya, which, despite its name, doesn't actually do fire damage, which is pretty weird. It can be buffed with Charcoal Pine Resin and the one-handed R2 was decent enough damage. As usual, we run around Freya. I did get hit once and went into 1 HP in a dream mode, but recovered fine enough. This weapon has such a cool name, and it looks awesome, but it's just pretty average, just somewhat lackluster one might say. Only one Great Soul remaining for the final cycle. Right, back to the Forest of Fallen Giants for the Pursuer. We went with the Iron King Hammer for the strike and fire damage. Actually mainly used the R2 for the fire explosion, because it just looks cool. Damage was really good, and this is only +1. Maybe I should have saved this for another boss? Oh well, it was still a blast to use it. With that, we got one last trip to the Lost Bastille to make. For the Ruined Sentinels, I used the Black Knight Halberd +1. Safe to say, this weapon is not the world beater it was back in Dark Souls 1, but with the sweet spot damage, it's pretty good. Lots of spinning to win, from both sides actually. My spin was better though, and they drift off into the Black Knight shortly after. ADP now climbs up to 60. We head down to Lost Sinner now. Along the way, this guy hits the ground so hard his soul bounces out of his body. Unexpectedly, Lost Sinner was by far the toughest of the Great Souls on this cycle so far, all because of these pesky pyro guys. I decided to use an Aromatic Ooze buffed Lucerne. Spin to win once again to kill the pyromancers quick, but it's still tricky to not get killed. This actually really sucked. How am I struggling with this more than the DLC bosses we've done so far on this cycle? I actually used a Bright Bug here. Focusing on the Sinner was key to victory. Trying to take out the pyro guys had been my undoing before, so I just kept on the Sinner until she died. Then I spun to 1, or whatever the past tense is, on these pyros to kill them without fear of being impaled by the Sinner. I really had to lucerne that victory. Hi Audia. We trudge up to Castle Dranglaic expecting the worst, but spin to win for about the millionth time this cycle was awesome. We took out all the enemies out the front of the castle using the scythe. We can buy the Crescent Sickle and Curved Twin Blade from Chancellor Welliger. He actually only sells these in New Game Plus Plus. But more importantly, we can grab the Frozen Flower because, you guessed it, we're going to get this hell sorted right now. Yet another Ice Rapier. That's like the 4th drop I've got on this run. I went to take on Ava, who seemed to have gotten into whatever Lud was having last cycle. I used the Black Knight Greatsword +1 for the innate fire damage. Poke was really good, but me getting one shot wasn't. Because most hits could almost one-shot me, the winning attempt actually ended up being hitless. I mainly just did the R2 poke throughout whenever Ava left herself exposed. Damage was decent, and after about 4 minutes, she was down for a catnap for the last time. I just knew there was a reason I stocked up on knives. I hate these guys. Anyway, we free the knights, and I also took out Orheim for once. For Burnt Ivory King, I used the standard longsword +9. Gold Pine Resin helped for more damage, and I was really surprised to see how much it actually staggered the knights, making the whole first section a lot easier. For the Ivory King, our knight friend actually survived for a really long time. I beat the Ivory King the first time I got to him here, that high ADP allowing me to avoid all his attacks with no problem. It felt really good to get this done so quickly, given how long this sometimes goes on for. Well, just one thing left here. Hey Lemon, fancy helping me? I deserve that. I didn't deserve that though. I used the last of our Black Knight weapons, the Great Axe at +3 for fire damage against the Twin Kitties. Damage was great, but the durability of the axe is surprisingly low and it ended up breaking, meaning the attempt was over. That was a bit of a disaster, so I swapped out the Ring of Blades +1 for the Bracing Knuckle Ring +1. It helped a bit, but still had to use repair powders several times. Unfortunately, the axe also has a sweet spot, meaning sometimes we get less than half the damage. I was able to finish off Lud while avoiding Zalan's attacks, but it was nowhere near as efficient as last cycle. With Zalan remaining, I was probably overcautious because of how long the R2 of the axe locked me into place. I really didn't want to die after all this. 9 minutes later, this fight is over, and we wish night-night to the Ivory King DLC. Way, 69 ADP. Okay, boss rush time! Flexile Sentry got the Defender Greatsword +1 for lightning damage boosted by water. 2 hits take out the adds, and a few R2s the Sentry couldn't defend against bring it down. The Belfry Goggles versus a normal spear. A fight for the ages, of course. I actually used a Bright Bug as there's one beyond this fight to replace it. They do quite a bit of damage, but I had quite a bit of experience doing this fight by now. We then head to the Executioner's Chariot, where we use knives to take out the Red Phantom by the Fog Gate. The Dragon Rider Twin Blade felt like a good choice for Executioner's Chariot, but it was only +1 and actually took 4 light attacks to take out the Necromancers. Let's be real though, they are the true threat, and with them down, I took out the skeletons easily and then slice up the horse into sashimi. For Royal Rat Authority, I used the Bastard Sword +9. Overkill? Probably, but it guaranteed that it killed the little bastards in one hit. With the little ones dead, the larger one never actually vomited, which made the fight slightly more pleasant. Slightly. And lastly, for Royal Rat Vanguard, I used the short sword to take them out. Not much else to say on this, it was both short and easy. Definitely didn't get poisoned and nearly die. With that done, we head to Dranglaic Castle and take out Lycia again. I used the Curved Nil Greatsword for the Twin Dragon Riders. This was only +1, but this weapon gets stronger the higher the New Game cycle you are, so at New Game++, the damage is pretty tasty. Its R2 is a spin to win, which of course we like a lot. Once the weaker rider is down, the second goes down without too much issue. Really cool weapon, like the moveset a lot, definitely not a vanilla weapon. This time, we smash up the Red Phantom more swiftly and get the key to the King's Passage. I used the Malformed Skull for Looking Glass Knight as it's one of our last strike weapons. It does great damage, but the durability is terrible. I had to use a lot of repair powder. It was also pretty slow and left me wide open, so I had to be cautious when choosing to attack or LGK might malform my skull. But with a few choice hits, down he goes. In Shrine of Amana, Forlornstein invaded me because of course he did. I didn't know if I mentioned it before, but I hate this Red Phantom guy here. Demon of Song is weak to dark, so we used the Roaring Halberd. We had to equip both Ring of Knowledge and Ring of Faith to be able to wield it. Pretty straightforward boss encounter, so much spinning, I'm kinda dizzy. A lot of people love this weapon, so there might be an uproar over me wasting it on this boss. Into the Undead Crypt, and we destroy Lycia once again. I had saved a cool weapon for Velstad, the Crypt Blacksword +2. Again, we had to use the Int and Faith boosting rings to wield it. Good damage, but looking back on this, I realized that Velstad actually resists dark. So why did I use this weapon for him? I'm tired, okay? We got it done. He did huge damage to us with any swing, so good thing we have God tier ADP. We mainly used the R2 for the overhead smash. It's a hilariously big weapon. Good thing Velstad is already in a crypt, I guess. We can kill Vendrick now also, and we use the Ivory King Ultra Greatsword. This weapon actually has bleed, quite high bleed as well, to bring Ven quick down as drick as possible. Once again, I wonder if I wasted this weapon here, but that seems to be a running theme with any weapon I use on certain bosses. We now head to Aldia's Keep, and of course, slay Al-Satil again because why not? Ian the Guard Dragon, meet Crescent Sickle. He is supposedly weaker to magic. The sweet spot was less of an issue than usual for me. I even landed some head hits for more damage. Smooth fight this time. If we had used this weapon in Elium Lois, would it have been a popsicle? 76 ADP now, which is actually crazy high. We have one last encounter with Tiny Aldia before doing Ancient Dragon. I used the Curved Twin Blade for the bleed to help this go slightly faster. Not much else to say here, this was the usual Ancient Dragon fight. The difficulty for it definitely hasn't curved in any way across these higher cycles. I now quickly went to get the crowns buffed as I realised this would actually be useful later. We then headed to Forest of Fallen Giants, where I swiftly vanquished Forlorn again. For Giant Lord, I use the Scythe, even though I think it's a Bardiche. But anyway, I used Rotten Pine Resin and slashed up his ankles until he's bar deceased. The run nears the end. I decided to get the Dark Lurker chasms out of the way first, as it was one of the last bits of level traversal I needed to do. Boink! For Dark Lurker, I used the Dark Drift Katana. Seemed like an appropriate choice, at least name-wise, although it feels pretty weak for a katana, even with Brightbug and Gold Pine Resin. Then again, Dark Lurker does hard resist physical damage, so maybe that's why. This got quite intense with both of them active, but I felt like I had quite a good grasp of this fight now, and after about 5 attempts, I managed to win, causing Dark Lurker to drift off into the dark. 82 ADP, is this even necessary? I'd say yes when it's Throne Watcher and Defender up next. But don't worry, we got the Fume Ultra Greatsword. Oh, I got one shot. That's perfect. On the next try, I hit Throne Defender so hard he spun round. Why is everything spinning in this game? Shame I couldn't spin that into a win after this. So, after a few more quick deaths, I managed to do it. I stuck with the heavy attack Big Pokes to stab them from a distance after their attacks. It was still pretty nerve-wracking, but I did use the Ring of Steel Protection +2 to help mitigate some of their damage, which I think helped. Hard to say. This was a bit of a blur. I'm really running on fumes at this point. The Chandra with Blue Smelter Sword should be easy, right? So yeah, I just baited her beam attacks and then used the special R2 explosion attack up close to help smelt her health bar. I also didn't get cursed thanks to the powered up crown. So close to the end. For Audia, I used the Ivory Straight Sword at +2, which, despite looking cool, kinda sucks. It's really slow for a straight sword and doesn't do that much damage. Also, it uses a lot of durability with every swing. The R2 was the only part that gave meaningful damage, but it was so slow I could only get one in during each window. This was a really long and painful fight, but we got there in the end. However, I walked out because we're still not done yet. One boss remains. First, we do our last ADP level up, bringing it to 85 now. Time to face our final challenge. I only made it to the boss room by the actual skin of my teeth here. For Sir Alon, I had saved the star of the DS2 one-shot contest, the Grand Lance. How did this go? Well, my voice is a bit tired, so I'll let this speak for itself. After a month's work, the run is finally over. What did we learn from this? Dark Souls 2 without health in ADP kinda sucks. Don't do it, especially in New Game Plus. This run drained the literal soul out of my body, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. I've been JK Leeds. See ya, and have a good one.